Most of the jewelry we see on the Academy Awards red carpet follows a very simple routine. It arrives from the vaults of major design houses, appears for a few carefully photographed hours, and by the next morning, it disappears back into the safe. But every now and then, something very different appears under the Hollywood lights. A Victorian tiara that existed long before the film industry, a diamond that usually lives behind museum glass, earrings that once belonged to a queen. And when a jewel like that appears on the Oscars red carpet, the evening suddenly becomes something more than just a fashion moment. It becomes a small encounter with history. Today, I want to look at some of those rare moments. Before we begin, please support my channel by clicking on the like and subscribe buttons. Thank you. I'd love to ask you something before we dive in. Do you usually watch the Academy Awards? And when you do you find yourself paying attention to the jewelry on the red carpet? I must admit, I often find myself feeling a little nostalgic for the days of old Hollywood, when the magnificent jewels an actress wore were truly her own, part of her personal story rather than a one-night loan. Let me know in the comments. I always enjoy reading your thoughts. That said, every now and then, the modern red carpet still produces moments that feel just as memorable. Moments when the jewels themselves seem to open a quiet conversation with history. To begin, let's return to the golden age of Hollywood. In 1957, the flashbulbs at the Academy Awards caught sight of something entirely unexpected resting in the dark curls of Elizabeth Taylor's hair. On March 27, 1957, Elizabeth Taylor attended the 29th Academy Awards at the Pantages Theater in Hollywood. She wasn't nominated herself that evening. Instead, she had been invited to present the award for costume design and to support her new husband, the producer Mike Todd. His lavish adventure film, Around the World in 80 Days, was one of the evening's major contenders. Hollywood in the 1950s loved spectacle, and the red carpet reflected that mood. Actresses appeared in dramatic gowns, elaborate hairstyles, and glittering jewels carefully selected to match the glamour of the ceremony. Yet, even in that environment, Taylor's appearance drew immediate attention. While the press noted the elegant drape of her rose gold chiffon gown, it was the object resting in her hair that truly caught the light of the photographer's flashbulbs. Elizabeth Taylor was wearing a genuine late 19th century diamond tiara. The piece had real presence. Crafted from gold and platinum, the structure carried a dense arrangement of old mine-cut diamonds, forming elaborate scrollwork, lattice patterns, and sharp fleur-de-lis motifs. Seeing a genuine Victorian antique on a Hollywood actress at that time was highly unusual. Most stars wore newly made pieces supplied by studios or contemporary jewelers. Antique jewelry of that scale was rarely seen outside private collections. And if you enjoy browsing antique jewelry like this, I've actually placed a link in the description to Laurel Antique Jewelry, a lovely London shop that specializes in Victorian and vintage pieces. But this particular tiara had entered Taylor's life only recently. Mike Todd had purchased it for her as a gift not long after their marriage. Elizabeth later recalled the moment he presented it to her. According to Taylor, Todd simply told her, with his characteristic confidence, "You're my queen. I think you should have a tiara." The tiara itself was not connected to any royal treasury or famous dynasty. It was simply a late 19th century antique, an elegant survivor of the Victorian era. Yet the moment Todd chose to give it to her was oddly fitting. The mid-1950s were a moment when tiaras had suddenly returned to the public imagination. Only a few years earlier, in 1953, millions of people around the world had watched the coronation of Queen Elizabeth II. Newspapers were filled with photographs of glittering state jewels, royal processions, and elaborate diadems. And in Hollywood itself, another transformation had just taken place. In 1956, Grace Kelly had left the film industry to marry Prince Rainier of Monaco, stepping almost overnight from movie sets into the world of European royalty. Against that backdrop, Todd's gift begins to look less like a whimsical extravagance and more like a gesture shaped by the visual culture of the moment. That Oscar night proved triumphant for Todd. When Around the World in 80 Days was announced as the winner of Best Picture, he reacted with unrestrained excitement. Witnesses recalled that he actually performed a brief celebratory jig right in the aisle of the theater. For a moment, the scene captured everything people associated with the golden age of Hollywood: success, glamour, and the sense that life for its brightest stars was unfolding in an almost fairy tale atmosphere. Which is why the next chapter of the story feels so sharply different. Exactly 1 year later, on March 22, 1958, just 4 days before the following Academy Awards ceremony, Mike Todd died in a plane crash in New Mexico. The sudden tragedy shocked Hollywood. In an instant, the dazzling symbol of their marriage took on a very different meaning. The tiara that had once been worn playfully on the Oscar red carpet became for Taylor a deeply personal reminder of a short but intensely happy chapter of her life. She kept the piece for decades. It remained part of her private jewelry collection and carried with it the memory of Todd long after Hollywood moved on to new stars and new fashions. The tiara did not return to public view until 2011, when Christie's organized the landmark auction of Elizabeth Taylor's estate. The sale attracted enormous global attention, with collectors eager to acquire objects connected to one of the most famous actresses in film history. The auction house evaluators set a practical pre-sale estimate of $60,000 to $80,000. When bidding opened, the price climbed rapidly, driven not only by the diamonds themselves, but by the powerful story attached to them. We often think of Elizabeth Taylor as the one who defined the Hollywood spectacle, but just a year earlier, another actress was quietly rewriting the rules of what it meant to be a star. Grace Kelly wasn't looking to dazzle the room. She was already living in a different world. The 1956 Academy Awards hosted a moment that wasn't about a spectacular nomination or a headline-grabbing jewel, but about a quiet, deeply personal farewell. When Grace Kelly arrived at the Pantages Theater on March 21st, she was, for the last time, just a movie star. The world knew her as an Oscar-winning actress at the peak of her career, but behind the scenes, her life was already undergoing a monumental shift. Less than a year earlier, a photo shoot orchestrated by Paris Match during the Cannes Film Festival had introduced her to Rainier III, Prince of Monaco. What was intended as a brief, formal meeting turned into an enchanting 30-minute walk through the palace gardens. That single encounter sparked a secret, transatlantic correspondence of letters, which led to a Christmas proposal in her family's Pennsylvania home. Her acceptance meant giving up everything she had worked for. To marry the prince was to become a princess, and to become a princess meant leaving her film career behind forever. So when she walked the red carpet that March evening in 1956, she was a woman standing on the threshold between two lives. Her attire was a masterpiece of symbolic elegance. She wore a white chiffon gown designed by Helen Rose, the very same MGM designer who was simultaneously creating her royal wedding dress. And her jewelry choices were particularly telling. In an era of statement diamonds, she chose a pair of simple, classic diamond and pearl earrings. It was a look of profound restraint, a quiet pivot away from Hollywood glamour toward a more enduring, aristocratic aesthetic. She completed her outfit with a pair of demure white gloves, which concealed what was arguably the most significant jewel in her possession. Beneath the fabric, she was almost certainly wearing her engagement ring from Cartier. While Prince Rainier had initially proposed with a more modest ring of intertwined rubies and diamonds, he soon replaced it with an imposing 10.5-carat emerald-cut diamond. This was the stone that became a star in its own right during the filming of her final movie, High Society. Yet, for this last public walk as an actress, the famous diamond remained her private secret, hidden from the cameras. Perhaps the most poignant moment of that evening was captured backstage, in a photograph of Grace Kelly standing beside Audrey Hepburn. It is an image of two icons, two paragons of elegance, but it also documents a crossroads. One would continue to define Hollywood for years to come. The other was about to disappear from it forever. The day after the Oscars, Grace Kelly flew to New York. From there, she would board the ocean liner that would carry her to Monaco and her new life. She would become Her Serene Highness, Princess Grace, and the simple pearls of her final Hollywood evening would soon be replaced by the historic jewels of a European royal house. If we reach back a little further, to 1947, we find a very different kind of aesthetic. Before we move on, I should be honest about the next jewel. Strictly speaking, it did not appear on the Oscar stage itself, yet it belongs so closely to the visual world surrounding the ceremony that it would feel strange to leave it out. In 1947, during the Oscar season surrounding the 19th Academy Awards, Katharine Hepburn was photographed wearing an extraordinary emerald and diamond necklace lent to her by the New York jeweler Harry Winston. The necklace itself is a striking double-stranded composition set with enormous emeralds separated by clusters of diamonds. But the most remarkable feature becomes apparent only when you examine the construction more closely. Unlike most Western high jewelry, the emeralds are not held in pronged settings. They are drilled through and strung along a wire, almost like beads. The necklace contains 15 emeralds and more than 300 diamonds, yet the stones themselves appear to follow a much older tradition of gem handling. Research published by the Smithsonian Institution suggests that several of the emeralds may have been cut in India as early as the 17th century. The largest stone, weighing about 45 carats, is barrel-shaped and pierced lengthwise through its center. In earlier Indian jewelry traditions, the richness of color and the weight of a gem were often valued more highly than symmetrical cutting or elaborate metal settings. When the necklace entered the American market in 1947, Harry Winston introduced it under the dramatic name the Spanish Inquisition necklace, repeating a story that linked the jewel to Spanish royalty and later to ladies of the French court. Like many such stories attached to historic gems, the claim proved difficult to document. Later research uncovered a clearer provenance. The necklace had belonged to Tukoji Rao III, ruler of the princely state of Indore in central India. In the early 20th century, he acquired the jewel as part of his remarkable treasury of emeralds and diamonds. After his death, his son, Yashwantrao Holkar II, sold the necklace to Winston in 1947. A few years later, the piece entered another prominent American collection when it was purchased by Cora Hubbard Williams, the daughter of an industrialist sometimes called the Shovel King of Pittsburgh. She kept the necklace until 1972, when she bequeathed it to the Smithsonian. Today, the jewel is preserved in Washington, D.C., where it is displayed under its historically accurate title, the Maharaja of Indore Necklace. The Maharaja's emeralds remind us of a time when the stone itself, its weight and its deep, velveteen color, was the only thing that mattered. But as the decades passed, the definition of a significant jewel changed. The weight of history was eventually replaced by the weight of the diamond itself. 13 years after Elizabeth Taylor appeared at the Academy Awards wearing a Victorian tiara, she returned to the Oscar stage under very different circumstances. The Hollywood of the late 1960s had changed, and so had Taylor's life. She was now married to Richard Burton, one half of the most famously extravagant couple in the film industry. And on Oscar night in 1970, she walked onto the stage wearing one of the largest diamonds ever seen on the red carpet. Suspended from a diamond necklace at her throat was a massive, pear-shaped stone weighing 69.42 carats. Even among Hollywood's famously lavish jewels, the scale of the diamond was astonishing. It was so large that insurance policies required Taylor to be accompanied by security whenever she wore it in public. The stone quickly became known as the Taylor-Burton diamond. But its journey to Elizabeth Taylor began several years earlier, deep in the premier mine of South Africa, where an enormous rough diamond weighing more than 240 carats was discovered in 1966. After being purchased and carefully studied by cutters, the largest portion of the stone was eventually shaped into the remarkable pear-shaped diamond that would later become famous. For a time, the jewel belonged to American socialite Harriet Annenberg Ames. Yet, the diamond proved almost impossible to wear comfortably in New York society. Ames later admitted that the sheer attention it attracted made her uneasy, and the stone spent much of its life locked inside a bank vault. Eventually, she decided to sell it at auction. The diamond soon caught the attention of Richard Burton, who had already developed a reputation for giving Elizabeth Taylor spectacular jewels. Determined to secure the stone for her, he entered the bidding when the diamond appeared at auction in 1969. Burton's representative fought hard, but in the final moments, Cartier secured the stone for a record price of $1,050,000. Burton was furious at losing. The following day, he contacted Cartier directly and bought the diamond from them for a slightly higher sum, ensuring that the extraordinary stone would ultimately belong to Elizabeth Taylor. At first, Taylor tried wearing the stone as a ring, but its size made that completely impractical. The diamond was simply too heavy for the hand. Jewelers eventually designed a special necklace setting that allowed the stone to hang securely against the collarbone, supported by a cascade of smaller diamonds. This was the form in which it appeared at the Academy Awards. When Elizabeth Taylor stepped onto the stage in 1970, wearing the enormous diamond at her throat, the jewel instantly became one of the most talked-about objects of the evening. For several years, the Taylor-Burton diamond remained closely associated with the couple's famously passionate and turbulent relationship. But after their second and final divorce in 1976, Taylor eventually made a practical decision. In 1979, she sold the diamond, its story passed on to another owner, and the money was turned towards something far more enduring. Part of the proceeds was directed toward building a hospital in Botswana, a project she had become deeply committed to after visiting the country. But what happens when the jewelry is too historically significant to be owned by any one person? In 2019, we saw a glimpse of that when Lady Gaga walked the carpet wearing a stone that rarely sees the light of day. When Lady Gaga arrived at the Dolby Theatre in a sculptural black gown by Alexander McQueen and long opera gloves, the necklace at her throat immediately drew attention from anyone familiar with historic diamonds. Resting against her collarbone was the Tiffany yellow diamond. The stone is one of the most recognizable gems in the world. Weighing 128.54 carats, the cushion-shaped diamond normally resides in the archives of Tiffany & Co. in New York and rarely leaves the house's Fifth Avenue flagship. For decades, it existed less as a piece of jewelry than as a display object, something most people had only ever seen behind glass. Its appearance on Lady Gaga marked the third widely noted occasion on which the diamond had been worn publicly. The story of the stone began long before Hollywood existed. In 1877, an enormous rough diamond weighing more than 287 carats was discovered in the Kimberley mines of South Africa. The following year, it was purchased by Charles Louis Tiffany, the founder of Tiffany & Co., who understood immediately that the gem had the potential to become a defining symbol for his company. Rather than cutting the stone simply to preserve its weight, Tiffany's chief gemologist, George Frederick Kuntz, made a different decision. The diamond was shaped to emphasize brilliance, producing the extraordinary 128.54 carat cushion-shaped stone known today as the Tiffany yellow diamond. For much of its history, the gem remained largely unseen. Before the 21st century, it had been worn publicly by only two women. The first was American socialite Mary Whitehouse, who appeared with the diamond at a Tiffany ball in 1957. The second, and most famous, was Audrey Hepburn. In 1961, while promoting Breakfast at Tiffany's, Hepburn wore the stone mounted in a ribbon rosette necklace designed by Tiffany's legendary designer Jean Schlumberger. Although the diamond never appeared in the film itself, the promotional photographs of Hepburn wearing it quickly became iconic. From that moment onward, the yellow diamond was quietly linked with the golden age of Hollywood. Over the decades, the gem has appeared in several different settings. Later presentations place the diamond in more contemporary necklaces, and at times it has also been incorporated into variations of Schlumberger's famous bird on a rock motif. The settings have changed with fashion, but the extraordinary yellow stone itself has remained the constant centerpiece. Unlike many other legendary diamonds, the Tiffany yellow diamond has never circulated through auctions or private collectors. It has remained in the possession of Tiffany & Co. since the 19th century, emerging only occasionally from the vault to remind the public that even a single stone can carry nearly a century and a half of history. Sometimes, the jewelry we see is a conversation with the past, a deliberate echo of a silhouette that a princess once wore. We saw this quite clearly with Emily Blunt, and later with the debate surrounding Elle Fanning's choker. Grace Kelly may have left Hollywood for Monaco in 1956, but her aesthetic influence has never truly left the red carpet. At the 96th Academy Awards in March 2024, we witnessed a moment that felt less like a new design and more like a distinct visual echo of the princess. Emily Blunt, nominated for her role in Oppenheimer, arrived at the Dolby Theatre wearing a structural avant-garde gown by Schiaparelli. As a house ambassador for Tiffany & Co., she was draped in roughly 110 carats of diamonds, including rings and stud earrings. But it was the necklace that immediately demanded attention. It was a diamond festoon featuring 3 rows of alternating cushion-cut stones and baguettes. If you are a student of royal jewelry history, this design likely triggered an immediate sense of déjà vu. The necklace Emily Blunt wore bore a striking, almost undeniable resemblance to one of Princess Grace's most cherished personal jewels. Back in 1956, shortly before her wedding, the National Council of Monaco wanted to present their future princess with a significant gift. They initially commissioned a ruby suite, but after it was rejected, they turned to Cartier. The result was a magnificent diamond festoon necklace featuring 3 rows of round and baguette diamonds, linked by triangular elements that allowed the rows to merge and separate fluidly. Princess Grace wore the Cartier original throughout her life, and it remains in the Palais Princier collection today, worn occasionally by her daughter, Princess Caroline, and her granddaughter, Charlotte Casiraghi. When you look at Emily Blunt's Tiffany necklace alongside Grace Kelly's Cartier original, the parallel is startling. It is rare to see 2 rival jewelry houses, Tiffany and Cartier, produce such visually similar work. Yet, in their press materials, Tiffany & Co. made absolutely no mention of Princess Grace, simply listing the piece as part of their high jewelry collection. Cartier, a house notoriously protective of its intellectual property, also remained silent. Whether this was a deliberate homage or a case of parallel invention, we may never know. But to me, it served as a beautiful, unspoken reminder that even in 2024, the style of Princess Grace still cast a very long shadow over the Academy Awards. If Emily Blunt's necklace reminded us of Grace Kelly, another jewel on a recent Oscars red carpet sparked an even more spirited debate among royal jewelry enthusiasts. This time, the focus was on actress Elle Fanning and her appearance at the 2025 Academy Awards. Elle Fanning arrived in a look that felt like a perfect incarnation of 1950s style. She wore a white lace gown by Taylor-Burton, the designer famous for creating the Princess of Wales's wedding dress, paired with vintage Cartier jewels. The centerpiece of her look was a diamond choker created in 1958. The necklace features a tight, scallop design with draped diamond swags that sit high on the neck. It is an incredibly elegant piece that immediately brought to mind another famous Cartier client, Wallis Simpson, the Duchess of Windsor. The resemblance was so striking that a theory quickly emerged on social media. Could this necklace actually be a remodeled version of the Duchess's own tiara? The Duchess of Windsor did own a famous convertible necklace tiara by Cartier, created in the late 1940s. It featured diamond festoons wrapping around large cabochon emerald beads. This piece was designed to be worn as both a necklace and a tiara. What makes this interesting is that the tiara was notably absent from the famous auction of the Duchess's jewels after her death in 1987. Its fate remains unknown. The theory that Fanning's necklace is the Duchess's tiara, stripped of its emeralds and remodeled, is certainly tantalizing. However, the reality is likely more prosaic. Cartier often used successful design motifs across multiple pieces. It is probable that Fanning's necklace and the Windsor tiara are simply siblings, pieces created from similar design templates during the same era. Wallis Simpson wore her diamonds to assert her place in society, and Elle Fanning wore hers to capture the elegance of that era. But the most striking jewelry moments are often those where the piece itself carries the weight of a different kind of history, a history of advocacy and reform. The 2023 Academy Awards brought an unexpected piece of royal history to the red carpet. When Malala Yousafzai arrived in a sequined silver gown by Ralph Lauren, She wore a pair of elegant diamond pendant earrings that immediately stood apart from the contemporary jewels surrounding them. The earrings were platinum Art Deco designs dating to the 1920s. But what made them remarkable was not their style or their diamonds. It was their history. The earrings had once belonged to Queen Soraya Tarzi, one of the most remarkable royal women of the early 20th century. As the wife of King Amanullah Khan, Soraya became closely associated with the reform movement that sought to modernize Afghanistan after the country gained full independence in 1919. She appeared publicly beside the king, spoke openly about education for women, and supported a number of ambitious social reforms. Among her most important initiatives was the establishment of the first school for girls in Kabul in 1921 and the founding of a women's hospital in 1926. During the royal couple's European tour in 1928, which included a state visit to Buckingham Palace, Soraya often appeared in Western dress and jewelry, presenting a very modern image of Afghan royalty to international audiences. The reform program, however, proved deeply controversial at home. Opposition eventually forced Amanullah Khan to abdicate the throne in 1929, and Soraya spent the rest of her life in exile. Nearly a century later, the same diamond earrings appeared on the Oscars' red carpet. For many observers, the moment carried a quiet historical resonance. Malala Yousafzai herself became known worldwide for her advocacy of girls' education and survived an assassination attempt for those beliefs in 2012. Whether intentional or simply symbolic in retrospect, the appearance of Soraya's diamonds on Malala created a striking visual connection between two women separated by nearly a century, both of whom had become closely associated with the struggle for education and opportunity for girls. Malala's choice brought a forgotten queen back into the spotlight. But not every jewel comes with a documented path. Sometimes, the Academy Awards red carpet offers a mystery that remains unsolved to this day. In 2000, when Hilary Swank won the Best Actress Oscar for Boys Don't Cry, she wore a necklace that looked like it had been pulled straight from a Victorian portrait. She wore an elaborate late Victorian diamond necklace dating to around 1890, composed of openwork scroll panels and pendant elements set with old-cut diamonds. But the real intrigue lay in the whisper that accompanied it. The press was abuzz with the rumor that this necklace had originally been made for one of Queen Victoria's daughters. It was a tantalizing detail, a direct link to the British monarchy on Hollywood's biggest night. But was it true? Years later, in 2021, the necklace resurfaced at a Christie's auction. Curiously, the official lot essay made absolutely no mention of Queen Victoria or her daughters. It confirmed the date, circa 1890, and noted its connection to Hilary Swank. But the royal provenance had vanished. In the world of high jewelry, sometimes a beautiful story travels faster than the facts, and the line between legend and history blurs under the lights of the red carpet. Whether it truly graced a princess's neck or simply captured the imagination of the press, the necklace remains a perfect example of how the Oscars can turn any jewel into a part of Hollywood lore. From a Victorian tiara purchased out of grand passion to the quiet pearls of a future princess, the Oscars red carpet has occasionally become a temporary museum, showcasing jewels with lives far longer than Hollywood itself. These are the moments that, for me, elevate the ceremony from a fleeting media event into a conversation with history. What jewelry moments from the Academy Awards do you remember most clearly? Perhaps some of you recall the news surrounding Grace Kelly's farewell to Hollywood, or seeing these ceremonies live on television. I would be genuinely fascinated to read your memories and impressions in the comments below. With the next Academy Awards just around the corner, it makes you wonder, doesn't it? What unexpected treasures might we see? Will a new piece of history make a surprise appearance? I know I'll be watching closely, and I hope you are looking forward to it as well. I should also say, this video was something of an experiment for me. As you know, my passion is usually centered squarely on the jewels of royal houses and their specific histories. Venturing onto the Hollywood red carpet is a little different from my usual path, but I hope you found this excursion into the intersection of royalty, history, and cinema just as enjoyable. If you did have a pleasant time with me today, a like on this video would be so very much appreciated. And if you haven't already, please do consider subscribing so we don't miss our next story together. Thank you so much for spending this time with me.